check through that and find out which ones they are for you if you like. But the game's just about loaded, so I'm going to be switching scenes and heading into the game. I will tell you, once I've switched scenes, because I run this as full screen on one of my monitors, I can't see chat as well as I otherwise could. I can see it okay some of the time, but not perfectly. So if my replies to anyone in chat are a little bit slow, well, I'm doing my best with what I can see. Looks like we actually have a ZVP here. Spawning in the lower right here on Daedalus Point for Team Unrivaled Gaming, we have Yukinagato as our blue Zerg player. And spawning in the upper left as our yellow Protoss player, we have Invencible for Team Composite Gaming. Or actually, just Team Composite is proper for them, rather than Composite Gaming. It's Team Unrivaled Gaming and Team Composite, the proper names for these teams. Anyway, so we have Yukinagato sending out that early Overlord as a scout, as usual. Invencible choosing that extremely early scout slash cheese opener that we saw last time, sending out the 9 probe to scout. So, a fellow Silver Zerg, huh? Nice to see you here. Anyway, so it looks like Yukinagato is going for an early probe scout, but has chosen to take that probe and chase around take the drone and chase around that probe. Possibly a decent decision to, prevent cheese and know where that probe is going and what it's trying to do. But we do see a gateway coming up for Invincible, so we're not going to see anything like a can rush. So far, just us drones owns no gas or anything for Yukinagato. Pretty typical on the timings. We see he's going pool first, which is mostly typical against Protoss, especially to prevent an early cannon rush, which he's obviously pretty worried about having a drone chase around this probe. Doesn't know whether he's opened Forge first yet, so it kind of makes sense, especially at this low level. You see a lot of cheese at this low level. Well, have a good night, Celisar. Nice to see you around. So all the timing's looking pretty good so far for our players. Got that first Zealot on the way for Invincible, as well as his Cyber Core. And it looks like that drone and probe decided to finally duke it out in the middle of the map. Yukinagato has managed to get himself a little bit supply blocked, but using an extractor trick to get out that one more drone while he waits for that Overlord to finish up. In the meantime, we see Warp Gate on the way for Invincible as soon as he finishes up the Cyber Core. And those first 2 lings going out to scout as that random drone is now coming home. And Invincible still going around the map with a probe. So those 2 lings find the first Zealot, and 1 Zealot definitely beats out 2 lings. Second Zealot even right there to ensure that those lings aren't going to get any useful scouting information. In the meantime, Yukinagato has his queens on the way. Actually, he has 2 extra queens on the way, having made 1 queen and has 2 more on the way already. And Zergling Speed is on the way. Don't always see that against Protoss, but in my opinion, Zergling Speed is pretty much always worth your time. Transferring over those extra drones. And Invincible doing pretty much a complete wall off, the typical near complete wall off with the 1 Zealot hole. Using a Forge and 2 gateways. And we see a lot of lings coming down for Yukinagato across the map. Just going pure lings and queens so far. other than drones, of course. But with that number of lings, either he might be a little bit afraid of what he sees on the other side of the map, or trying to engage in some early aggression. Now, the lings aren't going to do that well against this. He's just throwing away lings against this single zealot and the mothership core adding some DPS. Zealot literally taking no damage beyond shields. But that little poke did at least tell him what's going on the other side of the map. Speed just finished up for those lings. And starting to get that creep spread out there. Always good to see creep spread this early in the game, especially in ZVP. As in ZVP, I often see creep spread pretty neglected, and sending a lot of these overlords out on the map for VAT vision. Now, I must say I like that, even though he just lost an overlord across over here by the Protoss base, that first overlord that he had sent out. But I still like that. And we see a proxy pylon going down here for Invencible. Probe still kind of hanging out near all the Zerg overlords and such. It is not in vision of the overlords. The proxy pylon has not been scouted. It's not all that near the Zerg base, but it's a nice place for a zealot warp in, especially while another attack is going. And this probe hanging out, probably going to see all the overlords. Probe and overlord hanging out together. And we got one Zergling coming to take that probe off that watchtower. Little force being active on the map here for Invincible, just going around, seeing what they can see. Sending one zealot to go take that one Zergling off the watchtower. So we had one probe, then we had one Zergling, and now we're going to have one zealot on the watchtower. So it's interesting to see the watchtowers actually fought over. In the meantime, we see the first roaches coming out for Yukinagato across the map, having added on a roach warren. Also having added a few spine crawlers for defense, and that creep is starting to spread across the map pretty decent. Also got his lair tech on the way. So we'll probably see either some Hydras or some Mutalisks coming out of Yuki pretty soon. In the meantime, if you hallucinated Phoenixes, go and get a pretty full scout of the Zerg base. That one getting a full scout of the natural and the new and upcoming third, and this one getting a full scout of the main. Both players mostly content to stay back in their bases, other than a few little scouting things, though. That Zealot even having been pulled back from his watchtower rather than holding it after taking out that one Zergling. Now, one thing I do find interesting is that he has not filled the little gap in his wall with that typical hold position Zealot right now. So, if Yuki were to try, say, a Zergling run-by right now, he'd get all the way into the main base if he wanted. He'd lose a lot of Zerglings doing it, but he'd probably get a lot of probes too. Anyway, okay, so we see +1 starting to come in for our Zerg player, 1/1 with missile attacks as the attack choice, whereas we see +2 weapon for our Protoss player and the first Colossus on the way. Colossi are a pretty good unit, but they're not always the best against roaches, and we see a really big roach and ling push coming from Yuki, right into the front door. Now, as I said, that front door is open, but the Zealots get in to wall it off in time. There's a lot of Zerglings there, but they're pretty much just going to fall with that clutch force field locking them in. In the meantime, perhaps some miscontrol on these roaches. They don't really seem to be attacking anything, probably set to attack, say, a specific unit back here or something, rather than actually try to batter down these gateways, which would make a lot more sense than just kind of moving around there. And this Immortal really doing work taking out almost all of these roaches. Things are looking pretty good for our Protoss player at this point. I mean, the supply is still in favor of our Zerg player with his superior macro, but that said, that's a whole lot of roaches he just lost for free. And I mean for free. I mean, all he took down was a few zealots. Like, let's look at the resources lost tab. Yeah, it's 2,000 in favor of Invencible at this point. But Yukinagato does have 3 bases going and seems to be able to afford it. And in fact, still has a mild supply lead at this point. In the meantime, the 3rd base now coming up for our Protoss player, Invencible. His units having moved out onto the map to try to protect it. Not necessarily the best place for Protoss units hanging out on the map like that. Zerg units always do best, and that's when they have a lot of space around them, and frankly a ton of Lings could do a really good work against that army right now. Only 1 Colossus in it. And no extended thermal lance yet, as extended thermal lance is only about half done. And we see another Immortal being pushed out of the Robo instead of another Colossus, which... Oh, I see. We must have 2 Robos. Good. Both an Immortal and a Colossus on the way. Yep, 2 Robos. And that makes a lot of sense since he's seen a lot of heavy roach play, and Immortals do a lot of work against roaches, man. Meanwhile, on the other side of the map, we see Hydralisks being added into the roach army of Yuki. As well as more Lings. +2 missile attack on the way, but no +2 armor just yet. As well as speed for the Hydralisks. I think he's actually gotten Hydra range already and is now just finishing up his speed. Also see a macro hatch having been added on. You don't see macro hatches all that often in pro games unless they're going really heavy Lings, but I find macro hatches to be amazingly useful, especially at a lower level when your injects aren't going to be perfect. I mean, we see this nearly full energy queen, so Yuki's not hitting every inject. But, that said, the macro hatch can often make up for some missed injects. Costs a bit of minerals, but it's generally worth it. Anyway, so we see both players with an army out into the map. That creep spread's getting pretty good for Yuki, already about, a quarter of the map covered in creep and halfway to his opponent's base. In the meantime, we see Yuki getting down a 4th base, immediately taking the gas geysers, as he is doing a pretty gas-intensive build, going, roaches and hydras. Interesting. He actually chose speed first, and now his groove spines on the way for his hydras. You don't see that very often. Most people almost always take groove spines first reflectively. And we see a Dark Templar, in fact another few Dark Templars being warped in at that proxy pylon that's literally been there half the game. We'll see if Yuki can handle these Dark Templars. I'm actually not sure if he has any... he does have 1 Overseer on the map, so... he might be able to handle it, but it all depends on what happens when he notices it. They're actually being very smartly separated across the map, and with only 1 Overseer... he's only going to be able to take 1 out at a time. Starting to lose drones here. Down at his natural. And another one up here taking down a queen. Those Dark Templars are doing some good work. Literally Dark Templars in every base. Got the whole army coming in. They've taken 1 of them down. Looks like they're going to get a second one. As that 1 Overseer is traveling with the army, or at least is... slowly coming in with the army. And behind all those Dark Templars, we see another Warp and a Zealots coming in for Invincible. Spore Crawler on the way somewhere for Yuki, so... he's at least going to see a Dark Templar there, but he's going to lose this 4th base just to 1 Dark Templar. Dark Templars have a lot of DPS. Here's a Spore Crawler coming in for this base too. In the meantime, we have this number of Zealots coming in. I don't think the Zealots are going to do very much damage as they've run into the main army, but those Dark Templars definitely did some work. taking down that 4th base, if nothing else, and getting a good number of drone kills. Let's see, 27 drone kills. I think I actually, yeah, they pretty much gutted the main mineral line. So, yeah, those Dark Templars, man, it can be a pretty good unit sometimes. And with no Overlord speed, even with the 2 observers he has now, they don't travel nearly as fast as the army does, and the army isn't even that fast. Traveling around his whole army on one hotkey, I suspect. However, even while this has been going on, Yuki is almost completely maxed out, up to 195 supply, 161 of our Protoss player. Our Protoss player is starting to build a bit of a mineral bank. We see 1 Archon coming in and Psionic Storm on the way for Invencible. Adding Archons to his composition, probably a good choice. Got a big engagement coming down. A lot of roaches facing off against this Protoss army, but they're not doing so hot. There's absolutely no answer to those 4 Colossi, and that AoE damage is just going to rip through any of the Hydras. Roaches are pretty tanky, but things are looking pretty good for Invincible at this point. There we got some Corruptors coming in to help deal with some of those Colossi, but I'm not sure there's enough Corruptors. However, the Corruptors are not being targeted down. Looks like they're going to get 1 Colossus. He seems to be forgetting to use Corruption, though, and they are finally targeted down as the rest of the Zerg army falls. Just look at that supply. 175 for the Protoss player and 109 for the Zerg player, and that's mostly in drones and queens. It's looking like this is going to be it here pretty quick, folks. There's just nothing that Yuki can do against this army. More Stalkers being warped in to join up, and Yuki EG's out. That'll be it for Set 2, our Gold League match with the Chobo Team League between Team Unrivaled Gaming and Team Composite. This is Week 1 play, which means that this game happened sometime last week. The games can happen anytime the players have time during the week. The matchups are set up at the beginning of the week, but the games can happen at pretty much any time.